Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another Patreon early access episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. Joining me for this month's early access episode, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is up? So this week or this month, seemingly the most appropriate thing to discuss is how has the whole coronavirus thing and COVID-19 impacted our lives and how are we adjusting in all of that. So Cam and I are going to just kind of sit down, kind of talk our way through that since I think we've done a handful of podcasts, but we haven't really had much of an opportunity to just talk about that topic and that idea. So before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you enjoy what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast everywhere you can. If you're hearing this the month it goes live, it is because you're supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, and we are immensely grateful for you for doing so. Thank you in particular to our Patreon producers, James L. and Jason Bellevue, for your continued support. If you are hearing this after the fact, after it has been released kind of outside that early month window, you can get early access to it by supporting us over there. This goes out to anybody at the $1 and above tier on Patreon. So yeah, let's just kind of dive in. Cameron, how has this all been affecting and impacting your life? We talked a little bit about it on the weekly episode of the show that we recorded right before doing this, where you talked about how you kind of been feeling a little cooped up and you just kind of needed to get out and drive here and there. So how else is this all hitting you?
I'll be completely honest. It's not been good. I think it would be better if I lived alone, like you do. I live with my brother-in-law, my sister, and their 3 children, and it can be difficult because their 3 kids are normally okay being inside or playing in the backyard, but like there is something that happened, I think, earlier this week where I think we all just kind of, in our own way, like snapped a little bit. Like we just people need to get out of the house. Like yesterday, my sister packed the kids into the van and drove them out to my parents' house to. My parents have I should note, my parents are, my dad's working even though he's retired. And so they live in a small home, but it's a very nice home. It's over here in Mesa, and it's in a little bit of an older home, but it's been remodeled by the people who owned it before them. And so it has just a very nice little home. And they have a very small pool as well as a jacuzzi that they've had for several years. And the jacuzzi is not hot enough right now where the the water is basically, so the water is warm enough for little kids to swim in and play in versus the pool water, which is not right now. It's late March. It's still really cold. So there's that. But on a big point of note is that has to happen. Something had to happen this week where kids were able to get out of the house. It's a bit nuts. I think they built their 12th pillow blanket fort this weekend, this morning. They're trying to be creative, but these are really creative, smart kids. But it's draining on them, and it's kind of also draining on me in the similar way. I talked about it on the show, the weekly show, but. So I got sent home from work, to start working from home. This week was the first full week. Last week was Wednesday. I had to go in at 6 a.m. to get my workstation computer to bring back home to start working. Also, when I did that, I found out that rather than doing my job regularly, for those of us who weren't hitting goal, I was a little off of our quarterly goal of where my percentages, certain things in my KPIs needed to be. If I had the rest of the month to work on it, I definitely could have gotten it up there. But there was a directive from. So I'm contracted through a organization that works for a very popular social media website that works deeply in advertising. So the client of the company I work for that I'm contracted out to as a worker, gave a directive that we need to start looking at working from home. The problem is that my program had never done a work from home program before. Like other parts of like other programs in the company do that. In fact, there are some that exclusively just do work from home. For people with certain like physical disabilities, it's a program designated to help people who are capable of working from home but aren't capable of working from an office.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but my department specifically, because of high security measures and things like that, because like we do have access to people's personal information, it was a question of whether or not the parent organization would let us work from home, or the client organization would. The client organization approved it a week ahead of time, and our organization said, okay, well now we have to figure out with our client how we're gonna like get you to work from home. Like, are we gonna buy a bunch of laptops and have you guys work from there? And in a very like big deal, like it's a very big deal that they did this because of how notoriously they are about their security with contractors.
Mm-hmm.
They basically told the company I work for that I work for through I'm contracted through, let them take the entire workstation home, which is crazy because that has all the access to it. Yeah. All I need is like an internet connection, and I have full back end access to their entire like advertising system, which is nuts. So, like, realistically, like, I can't do anything to anybody's accounts. I don't have those sorts of permissions. But the fact that I could like see what people are doing is damage enough. If I were to, break my obligations in my contract and everything else to be just a massive douchebag, I could. I'm not going to, because
I remember you telling me that and me thinking, wow, like that is a interesting like approach, because like for me, I'm in largely the same boat with the Symphony, where like I had done remote work very briefly, like when I was on call basically while we were at PAX, and so they kind of showed me, here's how you go in, here's how you can like log into the VPN and all that stuff. But by and large, like, they were not a work from home kind of organization, even though we very easily could have been, as this has kind of shown, is that like there are certain departments that can very easily just, hey, you can log into the network and then work from home. So like I'm working through like remote desktop connections, but I'm logging in on my laptop, but I'm logging into my desktop computer at work. So like the fact that they just had you take the whole workstation home with you, I was like, oh, that is a step that they didn't even have to do. Like, it's as it is. Like, when I started the Symphony, because I haven't even been there 3 months yet. When I started there at the beginning of the year, I was like, it blew my mind that they were still so tied to the like PCs instead of like, because what we were doing when I worked in this kind of job at Phoenix Theater 5 years ago, everybody that was in like my kind of position was working off of a laptop, and you would basically take the laptop, you could take it into a meeting and work in the meeting, or you could take it to your desktop or to your desk and dock it in and plug into your like dual monitor setup there or something like that. So the fact that I didn't have that option, and then working at the Community Foundation was the same kind of thing. Like, I was working off of a laptop. I've not been tied to a desktop computer for 8 years, since I worked in like solar, basically. So the fact that I'm tied to a physical PC at the current location, I'm just like, this. I don't understand why they haven't started migrating people to more mobile laptop, because especially with the number of meetings I'm in, I'm like, I can't do what I want to do in half those meetings because I can't take my PC with me into the meeting. I have to, so I'm like stuck being like, okay, well, I'm going to take notes on what we're discussing. I could have just looked it up for you right now, but I can't access that from this meeting. So, so it's one of those things, like, they ultimately have been able to basically let us just log in from our personal laptops or PCs or whatever to do the remote desktop stuff. But yeah, I'm just like, I wish it had been a smoother process and we just had laptops that I could have just taken home with me. And they had I think 3 or 4 that they rented out or checked out to people around the organization who didn't have the capabilities to work from home otherwise. But yeah, it's been a like everybody's, I think, having to come up with, okay, how do we make work from home work for a lot of these kinds of jobs? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been an interesting like new dynamic, certainly.
I will say there are other programs in like the building. So I should note there was in the office building that I work in, not in my program. So like I never would have had interaction with them necessarily unless like I was in the break area and they were at the same time, which just usually just doesn't happen. I usually don't hang out in the break area. But there was somebody in my building that was confirmed case of COVID-19.
Yeah, we had one. So they sent us all home. They started sending people home Wednesday the 18th. Yeah, because it was basically the day before my birthday is the first day I was working from home, and so we were only in the office. Most people were only in the office on that Monday and Tuesday. They basically did like a phased work from home kind of thing. So they sent some people home on Wednesday, some people home Thursday, and some people started working from home on Friday. But like they sent us an email this last Monday. God, it has been a long week.
It really has.
They sent us an email saying that one of the administrative people and one of the musicians had been in contact with somebody who was later identified as somebody who later tested positive for coronavirus. They had, like, the people that I worked with had not started showing symptoms. They were not tested positive, but they had been in the vicinity of somebody who later tested positive after, like, they had all met up for whatever reason. They didn't tell us who it was or anything, but they were like, so please think back on any kind of interactions you had the week of, the 16th through the 20th or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, you mean like when you had us all sit around a table for an all staff meeting together? Yeah, that's probably the big interaction I would have had with anybody. But it's been 10 days as of recording, or 11 days as of recording, and I've been fine. I've not shown any signs or anything like that. So and nobody else at the organization that I am aware of has tested positive or anything like that. So, but it was just like because of that revelation, they were basically going to say, okay, everybody will come. We're gonna work from home for a couple weeks, and then we'll revisit and start letting people back in. But because there was a confirmed case adjacent to us, they have closed our office down. So the office is in lockdown for 14 days, and we will not go back into the physical facility, not for like the next Monday. So like we're recording this on Sunday, so a week from tomorrow basically is the earliest that anybody from my office could go back into the office and work from the facility downtown. So I'm on at least another week's worth of work from home as a result of that. So yeah, for me that's been like, it's been weird because that is certainly a different element that I'm just not used to. And whereas like for the most part, I'm like, yeah, I stay in on weekends. I don't really like the most I go out is occasionally I'll go catch a show with somebody or something like that. Or, especially in recent months, I've been seeing a lot more movies and stuff in theaters. So when that got taken away from me, it has been a lot of, all right, I'm watching some stuff on Netflix. I'm playing Animal Crossing. I'm watching a Disney Plus show or something like that. I've gotten a little restless here and there, and there have been a couple days where I'm just like, it's really hard to get out of bed, and I'm just super lethargic because I'm not staying active in a way that like, even when I'm not going out and seeing all those things, I almost never eat at home, or I never like make food at home these days. So I would at least be going out to like In-N-Out or something like that and grabbing dinner and then bringing it back to my apartment. But in this, like I'll occasionally do like a Chipotle order that I'll go and pick up. But like the last 4 or 5 days, it's been like I ordered a pizza, or I ordered 2 pizzas from Hungry Howie's or something like that. And that was like dinner and leftovers for the next couple days. or I did Dickie's Barbecue yesterday that I had delivered through DoorDash. Portillo's I had delivered through DoorDash like a week or so ago. So it's like I'm getting a lot more delivery and a lot more DoorDash stuff than I had in the past. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting at. Is like I want to say there were like 3 or 4 days where I just didn't even leave my apartment. I just kind of stayed, and I live in a tiny studio, 1-bedroom apartment kind of thing. So it has been very, very odd in that, where it's like, because we're not in Arizona, we're not in a like strict, lockdown kind of state, or at least I haven't seen that we are. If we are, I missed it. But
no, our governor's taken some flack for not acting quicker. Granted,
Doug Ducey's
he's been following the lead of our president, so that tells you enough. But as somebody my sister works in the education system at administrative level, there was a lot of like quick movement to transition kids to getting them out of schools, getting them like setting this up, trying to make sure that like the transition works well enough. It's not great. This is really bad, especially for kids who there's a good chance that some of them we don't know what's going to happen. This has never happened before.
Yeah.
There are kids who literally their entire senior year, like last half of their senior year, where, prom canceled, grad trips canceled, like the things that like quote unquote define your senior year have all just been canceled.
Yeah.
And to top it all off, also, like I'm working from home, but my facility is still open. Like the place that my office works out of, our office building's still open. There are other programs that are part of the company that do qualify as like require like essential parts to companies. I'm contracted through a company that very much is part of like a telecommunications type of business where it's not just customer support, it's like essential stuff to keep the business running that internally these other businesses can't handle, that are basically like they're acting as a third party for anything from billing to technical support to all sorts of stuff. And the people they're helping out most of the time are like, there's one program that I work with, the people they're helping out are first responders. Like that's basically what's like dog piled up on top of them. The people they're helping out with are people who are first responders right now. So like they're supporting those people and are considered essential because of it. But they confirmed the case of Corona at my office. It was a matter of, they said, hey, we understand, but we are considered part of these essential things. But like the thing is, they're like, so like we're like our site is reopened, like you can start coming back to work, but we also understand if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, and reach out to your program director to figure out like what the plan is, what options you have available to you. So I'm super grateful that like I'm not going to have to make that, like, because here's the thing, I'm not going to go back there anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to like, I'm working from home. I'm doing the job from home. That's good enough. Like, do not ask me to like drive into a place that has hundreds of people in different offices all cramped together in there. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not. Like, you can fire me or lay me off or whatever, but like, I'm not going back to that right now.
Yeah, that's I remember, let's see, God, it was the 13th of March is when I tweeted out, because I work for Symphony, I work in nonprofit arts, and I tweeted out back on the 13th about how, like, before any of this had really kind of taken over, it was things were starting to get canceled, and they were basically saying, hey, you shouldn't have groups of like 50 or more people together. And I basically said, like, this is going to kill a lot of the arts. And it killed that when the 2008 recession hit, a whole bunch of funding dried up and a whole bunch of arts organizations in Phoenix like closed. And with this, it's not that funding's drying up, it's that we're not, like, none of us are able to do our performances. All of our performances are being canceled. And so we have no revenue coming in. So that's like, I talk about like, oh yeah, I'm working from home. That's not even like talking about the fact that all of the musicians at the symphony were let go this last week, and a third of the administrative staff was let go. So I still have a job. Those of us that remained had to take salary reductions. So I'm like, even that, I'm one of the lucky ones in the arts right now that I have a job still, because the rest of our season has been canceled. So we're not going to be bringing in any more revenue until, like, we're basically, our drive right now is, we're really hoping that this all clears up before our 2021 season starts in September, and we're hoping that we can all be back to normal by then. And the organization is going to do their best to bring back all the musicians and all the people that got laid off when the new fiscal year starts, if they have the resources to do so, as well as reinstate original salaries and whatnot. But so much of it is still up in the air, and who knows how any of this is going to like play out for the next few months, really. So like that's kind of where, like, that's another thing that like has been weighing on my mind throughout the week of like, I don't know how secure this job is. It was an arts job, so it wasn't in the greatest of places to begin with, but now that like everything else is being impacted, it sucks. You talking about senior year, like the analog I have for that is when I was a junior. Yeah, I was a junior in high school. No, 2001 would have been, junior year. 2001, 2002 was my junior year in high school when 9/11 hit. And we were still like, as an organization or like as a school and whatnot, we were recovering from that for the next 2 years. So my senior trip or my junior year trip in like choir, we were supposed to go to Chicago. And then at some point we had talked about like taking that trip to DC in light of everything. But ultimately the teacher kind of like backed down and was like, hey, I don't feel comfortable taking, 60 to 100 kids with me on a cross-country trip through flights and stuff. So, like, my junior year trip turned into we hopped on a bus and went to Disneyland. And then my senior year trip just ended up, like, we went to Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon. And it was, like, a huge letdown for, like, senior year should have been, like, oh, we were going to go to New York or something like that. But the country was still in a state of like healing, and so like that impacted those kinds of memories for my senior year. So yeah, I can't even imagine being in school right now where you're if you're still learning, it's through like a Zoom web conference or something like that, or your parents are trying to keep you doing school from like homeschooling and all that kind of stuff, while they're also dealing with all of their stuff at whatever their professional level is. It's just it's bonkers in how ill prepared this country is for something like this. How easily disrupted like the whole world becomes. It certainly like I said, lots of arts organizations are going to close. Lots of just every industry is going to close their doors because they're not making enough money to weather this storm.
I mean, here's the reality, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is like statistically what you consider the coronavirus pandemic to be. For a small business survival. This is part of the problem. Is like I work with small businesses every day of my job. My job is literally to operate and assist small to medium-sized businesses in basically advertising, social advertising, I guess. Like, I'm thinking of a word here, but I can't remember it. Consultation. And like I help build together I help them build their kind of campaigns out and work through that process and teach them how to use social marketing platforms. Part of like my research that I have to do. So I'm not working right now with my regular stuff. What I'm doing is basically I'm in anybody who they're just trying to keep us busy. They don't want us to hurt our numbers any worse than they are. So for those of us who weren't exactly reaching those numbers, even though I was very close and I definitely could have pulled it up before the deadline of the end of the month, there's like the organization I'm contracted out through determined, hey, we just don't want these list of people to be working right now. Rather, just keep them busy. Like, we'll run put it like have them like basically like do some restructured remedial stuff to try to like quote unquote like get better at their job, which is nonsense. But the important part is like I'm not doing my actual job, which means I'm sitting in these boring as hell meetings for like 8 hours a day. And it's nuts, and I hate it. But one of the things that we were going over is, of course, like right now what we're dealing with, and to kind of get people prepared, and what we can also take away back to our teams and tell them about is like surviving the pandemic and like what small businesses can do. The reality is that a quarter of all small to medium-sized businesses will not reopen after the pandemic is over, guaranteed. Minimum 25%. They're just not going to reopen. Like, statistically, like, this is the same kind of... The pandemic levels in the United States are at the same point that they would be if there was a natural disaster that prevented you from being able to go back into work. That's where we're at. That is why, like, if you're like, well, I don't understand why. It's just like a flu, but worse if you're old or whatever. I don't understand what the big deal is, especially these, like, you know, spring breakers running out to do that, to try to, like, get their spring break on. During this entire pandemic and like populating beaches and public areas and bars and stuff, like places that honestly should have been closed by the state, but I don't know, maybe they thought people would be smart enough not to do it. They should know better. They don't know, they do know better, but they just make the decision to do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's, and you have like shitty people running those states that didn't do closures because they wanted tourism money.
Yeah, the beach will be open by 4th of July. That's a direct quote from Jaws, when there's literally a murderous shark out in the waters that's eating people, or not even eating people, just murdering people by like whatever it can get its jaws on. And he's like, well, like will we be throwing people back out in the water like chum? Yes, but we need those tourism dollars.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's bonkers, but like when you have to deal with it, this is the reality. And this is why people like, you know, people who campaign off of fiscal conservatism especially are super worried, because this reveals the faults of when you cut too many essential programs that just because they haven't been used recently doesn't mean they should be here. Hint, hint, the global pandemic team for the CDC that got cut 2 years ago. Who developed the playbook and everything that would have been needed and necessary for us to avert the worst parts of this disaster. They're not there to do their job, so the bad things happened. And we're in the pandemic has greatly hit the United States, and by the time it's over, the United States will probably bear the worst brunt of it because we did not take proper precautions. And we have a larger population, and especially population density, than even places like Italy that also weren't able to get things under control, or Spain that weren't able to get things under control initially. Things peter out for them and are like getting better for them at this point now because it's hit like the apex. We still haven't hit our apex. Things will get worse.
Yeah,
they will, and it's awful and it's terrible because I know people. Like, here's the thing: it's happening to enough people that we all know people now who are suffering because of it.
Yep.
Somebody I work with, their grandmother. Or sorry, not their grandmother, their aunt, their elderly aunt, can't get treated because they live in Seattle, and Seattle and New York City are triaging because they don't have enough resources to help everybody. So they have to triage those who are most likely to survive. She has a long time history of smoking and lung issues because of it. And so the doctors told her, like, essentially, we're going to discharge you and send you home because we have to prioritize other people. Like, doctors are having to do that right now. And the thing is, it's not a bad thing that they're doing it. It's part of their job. Their oath demands and their training demands that they save the people who are most likely to survive. And even if they gave her full treatment, there's no, like, the likelihood of her surviving this is so low that even with treatment, she probably wouldn't survive. So she's been sent home. We have people who we know whose parents are currently in the hospital right now.
Yep.
This is not a great thing. This is a terrible thing, and it's awful. And the reality for businesses is that quarter of them will never reopen, minimum. Statistically, it's just not going to happen. So if you're out there, this is us very much imploring you, please, 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 even if you're not at risk, you have no idea the ramifications your actions can have in putting others at risk. Do not go to bars, do not go to events, do not go to Corona parties.
Yeah, I remember the last day I was at work was St. Patrick's Day, and I remember leaving the office that day.
Yep.
And there's like a bar basically right outside the lobby doors of my office in downtown Phoenix, and there were a handful of people just there because it was 5 o'clock or whatever. There were a handful of people just hanging out there. What caught my eye, and I don't know in what capacity they're there, but there were a couple of emergency responders that like seemed to be like basically off-duty firefighters that from my walking down the street looked like it was a couple of firefighter guys flirting with the girls at the bar. In their they did not appear to be working in the moment or anything like that. It was like, oh god. But fortunately that was also, they did there was a like bars should be closed at 8 p.m. that night. So like hopefully that curbed what could have been bad, but obviously most people were having their their St. Patrick's Day parties Saturday and Sunday prior to that. And that was, I'm sure, a nightmare that ballooned up all sorts of cases here in Arizona. So it's not been great. And yeah, it's like there will be wide-reaching and long-lasting ramifications of this in ways that like nobody is aware. Like the response, the 2.5 trillion or whatever, is gonna do nothing to, like, it's gonna be the smallest of like band-aids for the amount that this is going to impact the economy for the rest of the year, if not for years to come. And that sucks. Like, so it's why it's very easy to take solace in something like Animal Crossing and take my mind off of that for, hours and hours at a time, or hop into Doom Eternal and just shoot some monsters and demons and kill some stuff.
Yeah, I will say I did not mean to bring things down so low.
Oh no, I mean it is a very real like reality check of like, hey, no, our country is not going to rebound from this by Easter, by even by the end of the year. We will not have been rebounded. Like, people will be dealing with the aftermath of this for a long time to come. What was it, like last week? 3 million new cases of unemployment had been filed or something, like,
yep,
shattering records. It's like that,
undoing all the progress that was made in the last 12 years for unemployment.
Yeah. Like that is not going to suddenly, all those people are going to have jobs to go back to, when the worst of this is done.
I'm going to make a note here. After 3 years, 75% of businesses that existed before a crisis like this are gone. Statistically.
I mean, yeah.
Like, you want it, like, this is the reality that we're in, and I hate to be like the Debbie Downer on this, but the reality is that we might have started this podcast off talking about how, like, yeah, it's kind of impacted me in this way, but I'm still working, I'm still doing this. We are quite out, and I apologize because you probably want to listen to this podcast to try to get away from Corona stuff, because I know I sure have tried to get away from it.
Well, if they did, they probably wouldn't have clicked the "How are we coping with Corona?"
Yeah, that's true. But like, this is the thing. I'm gonna end my. I realize I'm taking like a very serious tone here because it is serious, but to kind of like start relaxing things a bit. Stay safe. Follow CDC guidelines. Listen to the doctors in the World Health Organization, as well as the Center of Disease Control. We can get through this. You can get through this fine. Your loved ones can get through this fine. Just be careful, because pay attention to what experts are saying. Follow people who are motivated by the purpose and cause of keeping people healthy and safe, not those who are for the purpose and cause of getting paid
or keeping investors wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pick life over profits kind of mentality.
And here's the thing: there's some businesses that can't do that.
Yeah.
There's some businesses that are like, this is the thing: things are going to be radically shifting over the next couple of months, and it sucks. It totally sucks, because we made a comment about it. We were on the weekly show and we said PAX literally still happened this month.
Yep.
PAX ended 27 days ago, 26 days ago.
Ended March 1st was the last day of PAX.
March 1st was the last day, so 28 days ago. We were making good on the plans of leaving Boston. And the world we came back to has been nuts.
Yeah. Lot has changed in a month. Let alone like the 2 months prior is when like things should have been changing and they weren't. And like we'll recognize that in hindsight for years and years and years to come. But yeah, it's all that said, it is like it's taking an emotional and mental toll and a physical toll, certainly, that like all this stuff is weighing on people's minds, and you know, doing the best we can to like stay connected with people. Like it, even a show like this or a site like this, like I sit there every day and I'm like, I should reach out to everybody about recording the new episodes and stuff for this week, but then I'm like, I don't want to bother anybody or whatever. I don't, like, everybody's dealing with their own stuff, and so it's a struggle I deal with daily of like throw in my like natural procrastination in, and you've got like a bad cocktail mix for that nerdy site. But yeah, that's kind of where like I'm like, I in practice could be doing so much more with the added free time of you know, not like even the commute of like, hey, that's an extra hour in a day where I'm not spending half an hour driving downtown and then half an hour driving back in rush hour traffic. So I should have more time to do podcasts or to sit down and record stuff with people. And I just can't even get myself to pull the trigger on reaching out to people and saying, hey, let's sit down and talk about DuckTales, or let's sit down and talk about X, Y, and Z, even though I know people theoretically have the time and are able. Just it's a weird mental, like, I'm mentally drained, even though I'm not, you know, driving into work or anything like that. It is just, it takes a toll, and it's hard to push through. And I know I am nowhere near the worst of what people are dealing with. I know plenty of people who have been, you know, formally laid off or been let go from their jobs. Fortunately, one of the nice things that my company is doing is that even the people they laid off, they're continuing to support them with health benefits for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long that's going to last, because I don't know when the money runs out, but that is a commitment that they've tried to make to the people affected in my organization. But I know elsewhere there are people who don't have that same luck, and who are dealing with a much scarier situation coming up in the weeks and months ahead. So it's not great, and it's a weird time for, I think, all of us. That I don't know what the world's going to look like in 3 months. I don't know what the world's going to look like in a month. I didn't think the world would have looked like this when we were leaving Boston a month ago. So who knows where we go from here. But
I was interviewed by somebody from radio, like a radio station in Boston, about the Corona scare and being at PAX East. And like, I stand by my statement that I made then, which is basically like, if you follow like best practices and guidelines about dealing with like convention stuff, you'll be fine. Wash your hands before you touch your face, etc. Like, I know that was sound advice and I followed it and that was good. But it's nuts to think that it's taken on like that much more of a heavy connotation since then.
Yeah, I mean, even that, like, I remember keeping an eye out or keeping an ear to the ground for like oh, so and so who attended PAX, has been confirmed as a patient, and like I never saw any of those stories, and I know I'm
Nope.
sure somebody like Jason Schreier would have like uncovered and found them. So the fact that like we did all get together at PAX and didn't have any kind of like significant outbreak or issues or anything like that, like thinking back now, it's like we were incredibly fortunate. But it is certainly like that just also speaks to how quickly everything ramped up. I keep seeing like every day I'll see tweets of like, on such and such date the first case was reported, and then like a month later, so this is how many cases we were at, and then like, yesterday we were at this many cases, and today the cases, like the cumulative cases, has doubled or something like that. We're seeing those levels of tweets because of the exponential growth of everything. It's just crazy to put that all in context of what this last month has been like. And yeah, like I'm doing my part, staying in and really limiting my contact. I know my family is as well. I checked in with my sister and brother-in-law today. He's still having to go to work, so that sucks for him. But he's not, and he doesn't want to be. But at the same time, he's, I guess, sitting out there thinking like, hey, we might be one of those companies that doesn't make it out on the other end of this, so I don't really want to push my luck, right now. And like my sister has been working from home for years and years and years, so like this isn't too much new for her. My dad's still having to go into work and fix airplanes and stuff like that, and I'm sure that's taking a toll, and hopefully he's staying as safe as he can out there. But yeah, it is a very different world than it was a month ago. So I think, yeah, I mean that's how I'm dealing with it. I'm dealing with it by playing video games and trying to just stay sane, as I think a lot of us are. Keep my mind off the heavier things. Like they're there. I know the worst is still to come, but I don't know how much I can do to stop the inevitable. So I'm just gonna try and do my part to curb whatever I can and enjoy the games I have while I have them.
Yeah. Something I did the other night that helped make a big difference for me in kind of decompressing and getting out of the house but still staying safe is I went driving. I drove for about hour and a half. I put on Blinding Lights by The Weeknd on repeat and just kind of just chilled, drove. It was a little bit later at night, so streets were empty. Just staying safe, staying careful, not breaking any laws or anything, not committing any crimes, but like, just do what you need to do to decompress, but just stay safe out there is my advice.
Yeah. Yeah. So we hope you're all being healthy out there, being healthy and safe. Think that can wrap up this dour episode of talking about the coronavirus, but something I think certainly we needed to kind of talk about at some point, because it hasn't really been like a focal point of a lot of our shows or any of our shows really, but it is obviously the big thing that's going on in the world these days. So thank you, Cameron, for sitting down with me to kind of discuss and just help process through kind of some of the conversation around it. Because like a lot of it is like, this is by and large the only time I'm actually talking to people is when I'm doing a podcast these days. So it's nice to just be able to get the things that have been bouncing around in my head out for a little bit, let them out into the world. So yeah, that'll wrap up this month's early access episode. Again, if you're hearing it here in end of March when it goes live, or in the month of April, thank you for being a Patreon supporter. And if you're hearing this after the fact, hopefully the world is in a better place by the time you're hearing our musings on the coronavirus. Hopefully, this is doom and gloom and it was much ado about nothing, even though I don't think it will be. But hopefully you're doing better wherever and whenever you are listening to this.
It's worth
go
a
around.
wish.
Yeah. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot. Anything you want to say, and any final thoughts there, Cam?
I have a lot to, like, I know we talked a lot about, a downer stuff. The rest of my pack stuff is getting pushed out sometime soon. Keep an eye out for that, or if you haven't checked any of it out, go check it out because some of it's good. Let me rephrase that. All of it's good. I don't make bad things. You should go look it up.
At least not by the time we publish them.
Yeah, oh, definitely not. No, we have definitely had.
I've tried to bring it up at least to the level of good in my edits.
You certainly have, and of course, I think we have the benefit of knowing each other for so long that you know what I'm trying to do or where I'm trying to go, but know that I'm falling short of getting there, and so you do a great job of like just helping me get it to that level. Because sometimes I do my best work when I have a sounding board to kind of like bounce things off of, and I really feel like our first round of edits usually act like that. So
yeah. Check out Cameron's PAX East coverage ongoing. You certainly of us were the most prolific, admittedly, because you played so many goddamn things. But thank you for continuing to work on PAX stuff and get it out the door.
Yeah. I just realized we can definitely say I fit in as many games for the year of shows that we weren't going to get. So there you go.
Yeah, that is true. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. Just keep an eye out on everything at That Nerdy Site for kind of all the latest. Obviously, we've got all the podcasts still going up, doing our best to stay on those schedules. I need to sit down and work with Logan to get our video game news show up and running. So hopefully sometime in the next few weeks, we'll have that going out there for the people. But yeah, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or check out thatnerdysite.com for all of the latest content from us. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, maybe even consider, if you are not already, supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Totally understand if you can't, especially in these, bonkers times in the world. But, every dollar basically just goes right back into making sure the content is able to stay alive. Pretty much everything we do goes right back into the site. So, if you are a Patreon, you get early access to these episodes, so that's your big perk for $1 and above. But yeah, that's going to do it for this month's early access episode. Thank you again, Cameron, for joining me. Thank you for listening. And as always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. And stay healthy. That's really the most important thing these days. Stay healthy.